Sarah Chen walked into the crowded coffee shop on a rainy Tuesday morning, her sleeves rolled up just enough to reveal the intricate tattoo that snaked around her forearm. What looked like simple black ink to most people told a story that could change everything about how they saw the quiet woman ordering her usual black coffee. The barista smirked, whispering something to his co-worker about another wannabe trying to look tough. Three businessmen at a corner table chuckled, making comments about girls these days and their fake military tattoos. None of them knew they were looking at someone who had spent 8 years in the shadows, protecting the very freedom that allowed them to mock her so carelessly. In less than an hour, their comfortable assumptions would be shattered, and Sarah's carefully guarded secret would transform from a source of ridicule into something that would leave an entire community speechless. Sarah Chen had grown accustomed to the stares. Every morning when she walked into Miller's coffee house in her small Colorado town of Pinewood, she noticed how people's eyes would drift to her forearm, lingering on the black tattoo that wrapped around her skin like a mysterious code. The design appeared simple enough to casual observers, a trident surrounded by an eagle and anchor, with numbers beneath that most people assumed were just decorative elements. What they didn't realize was that they were looking at one of the most exclusive military insignias in the world. The barista Jake was a college dropout who spent his shifts making jokes about customers to pass the time. When Sarah approached the counter that Tuesday morning, he couldn't resist another jab. "Let me guess," he said loudly enough for others to hear. "Black coffee for the tough girl with the fake Navy tattoo?" His co-worker Madison giggled, glancing at Sarah's ink with obvious disdain. "I bet she got that at some strip mall parlor to impress guys at bars." Sarah handed over her exact change, her expression unchanged. She had learned long ago that explaining herself to strangers was pointless. The truth was something most people couldn't comprehend, and frankly, she preferred it that way. Her anonymity was both a burden and a blessing. After 8 years serving as one of the first female Navy SEALs, blending into civilian life required her to become invisible in plain sight. The three businessmen in corner booth had been regulars for months, conducting their weekly meetings over overpriced lattes while discussing their latest ventures. Today, their conversation had shifted from quarterly projections to commentary on Sarah's appearance. "These millennial women think slapping on some military ink makes them warriors," said Marcus, an insurance salesman who had never served a day in uniform. "Probably watched too many action movies." His companions nodded in agreement. David, who ran a small accounting firm, chimed in with his own observation. "My nephew got similar tattoos after playing too much Call of Duty. Kids today don't understand what real service means." The third man, Robert, who owned a local car dealership, added, "She probably tells everyone she was Special Forces or something ridiculous like that." Sarah found her usual spot by the window, opening her laptop to review the morning's emails from the veterans organization she now worked for. The Colorado Mountain Veterans Support Center had hired her 6 months ago as their operations coordinator, though they knew nothing about her classified background. On paper, she was simply a Navy veteran transitioning to civilian life. The reality was far more complex. Her phone buzzed with a text from her former teammate, Marcus Rodriguez, who now worked private security in Virginia. "Saw the news about Pinewood. Stay safe out there, Chen." Sarah frowned, quickly switching to her news app. The headline made her blood run cold. "Armed group threatens Colorado mountain communities. Domestic terrorists target small towns for training exercises." The article detailed how a militia group called the Iron Patriots had been making threats across rural Colorado, claiming they were conducting readiness operations to protect America from internal enemies. Local law enforcement was taking the threats seriously after similar groups had carried out attacks in other states. Pinewood, with its isolated location and limited police resources, had been specifically mentioned in intercepted communications. Sarah's trained mind immediately began assessing the situation. The coffee shop's layout, exit points, potential cover positions, and civilian locations all registered automatically. It was a mental process she couldn't turn off, hardwired after years of operations in hostile environments. She noticed Jake and Madison were now serving a group of teenagers who had just arrived, completely oblivious to any potential threat. The businessmen continued their mockery, having moved on to critiquing her laptop choice. Outside, the rain was getting heavier, and Sarah noticed something that made her pause. A white van had been parked across the street for the past 20 minutes, its occupants visible but not clearly identifiable through the tinted windshield. In her previous life, such details would have immediately triggered protocols. In civilian life, she told herself it was probably nothing, just her hypervigilance acting up again. Her phone rang, displaying the name of Chief Patricia Williams from the Pinewood Police Department. They had met briefly when Sarah first moved to town, a routine check-in that the department conducted with all new veterans in the area. Ms. Chen, I hope I'm not disturbing you. We've received some concerning intelligence about potential threats to our community, and I wanted to reach out to local veterans who might be able to assist if needed. Sarah stepped outside to take the call, noting that the white van's occupants seemed to shift their attention toward her movement. What kind of assistance are you looking for, Chief? She asked, keeping her voice neutral while maintaining visual contact with the vehicle. Honestly, we're understaffed and underprepared for what these groups might attempt. I know from your file that you served in the Navy. Any combat experience that might help us understand what we're dealing with? Chief Williams sounded genuinely concerned, her voice carrying the weight of responsibility for protecting a community with limited resources. Sarah weighed her response carefully. Revealing her true background would change everything, but withholding information could put innocent lives at risk. I have some relevant experience. When do you need to meet? As she spoke, she noticed movement in the van. Two figures were exiting, both wearing tactical clothing that seemed out of place for the quiet mountain town. How about now? I'm actually just down the street at the municipal building. This situation is developing faster than we anticipated. The urgency in the chief's voice matched what Sarah was observing. The two men from the van were now walking purposefully toward the coffee shop, their body language suggesting they weren't local tourists. I'll be right there, Sarah said, ending the call and quickly moving back inside. Her instincts were screaming warnings, but she needed to maintain her cover while ensuring civilian safety. She approached Jake at the counter, her demeanor calm but direct. You might want to lock the front door for a few minutes. There are some unusual people outside who don't look like typical customers. Jake laughed dismissively. What, you think your fake military training makes you some kind of security expert? This is a public business, lady. Madison joined in the mockery. Maybe you should call your pretend Navy buddies to come help. The businessman overheard the exchange and couldn't resist adding their commentary. She probably thinks she's in some action movie, Marcus said loudly. Next she'll be telling us she's a secret agent or something. Their laughter filled the small space, drowning out Sarah's attempt to warn them about the approaching threat. Sarah made a quick decision. She gathered her belongings and moved toward the back exit, pulling out her phone to call Chief Williams back. But before she could dial, the front door chimed as two strangers entered. They were both wearing dark clothing with tactical boots, and one had a visible bulge under his jacket that suggested a concealed weapon. Their eyes immediately scanned the room with the systematic precision of trained operatives. The larger man approached the counter while his companion positioned himself near the front door. Coffee shop's closed for maintenance, he announced to Jake, his tone leaving no room for argument. Everyone needs to leave immediately. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The teenagers near the back booth looked confused, while the businessmen finally stopped their conversation, sensing something was wrong. Jake stood frozen behind the counter, no longer laughing about fake military tattoos. Madison had gone pale, instinctively stepping back from the register. Sarah recognized the tactical positioning immediately. These weren't random criminals or confused tourists. They were conducting what appeared to be a reconnaissance operation, possibly preparing for a larger action. Her mind raced through response options while maintaining the appearance of a confused civilian. The man at the door spoke into a small radio device, location secured, proceeding with Phase 2 assessment. He then looked directly at Sarah, his gaze lingering on her tattoo, with what seemed like recognition rather than casual interest. In that moment, Sarah realized her carefully maintained civilian cover was about to be tested in ways she had hoped to avoid. The very people who had spent the morning mocking her fake military background were about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous people are those who work hardest to appear ordinary. The question now was how much of her true identity she would need to reveal to protect the innocent people around her. The larger man pulled out what appeared to be a photograph, comparing it to the faces in the room. When his eyes met Sarah's, she knew their presence wasn't random. Somehow, her past had found her in the last place she expected to need her specialized skills. The small mountain town of Pinewood was about to learn that the quiet woman with the fake tattoo was anything but ordinary. The tension in Miller's coffee house had become suffocating. Sarah watched as the larger man continued examining the photograph in his hand, his partner maintaining position by the door like a seasoned professional. The civilians in the room were beginning to understand that this wasn't a normal situation, but none of them grasped how dangerous these two intruders actually were. Sarah Chen, the man with the photograph, said, his voice carrying an authority that made everyone freeze. Former Petty Officer First Class, Naval Special Warfare Development Group, we've been looking for you. The words hit the room like a thunderbolt. Jake's mouth fell open, the same Jake who had been mocking her fake military tattoo just minutes earlier. The businessmen in the corner booth suddenly looked very small and very quiet. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. These men knew her real background, which meant they had access to classified information that should have been impossible to obtain. Either they were government operatives, which seemed unlikely given their methods, or they represented a serious security breach that put not just her at risk, but potentially everyone she had ever served with. I think you have me confused with someone else, Sarah replied calmly, though every muscle in her body was coiled and ready. Years of training had taught her to assess threats while maintaining plausible deniability. I work at a veterans center. I've never heard of whatever group you mentioned. The man smiled coldly. DevGru doesn't officially exist, does it? But we know about Operation Neptune's Gate. We know about your missions in Syria and Afghanistan. We know about the classified work you did that the Navy won't even acknowledge in their official records. He took a step closer, and Sarah noticed his partner's hand move closer to his concealed weapon. Madison had pressed herself against the back wall, tears streaming down her face as she realized the woman she had been laughing at was connected to something far beyond her understanding. The teenagers near the back booth were recording everything on their phones until the man by the door barked at them to put their devices away. Marcus, the insurance salesman who had been so confident in his assessments of Sarah's fake credentials, was now visibly shaking. "What do you people want?" he managed to ask, his voice cracking with fear. "We want to send a message," the larger man replied, never taking his eyes off Sarah. "The Iron Patriots believe that operators like Monsieur Chen here have forgotten their true loyalty to America. We think some re-education might help her remember who she really serves." Sarah's blood ran cold. The Iron Patriots were the domestic terror group mentioned in the morning's news, but their knowledge of her classified background suggested connections that went much deeper than a typical militia group. Someone with access to highly restricted military databases was feeding them information, which made this situation exponentially more dangerous. "Look," Sarah said, raising her hand slightly in what appeared to be a gesture of surrender but was actually positioning herself for action. "Whatever you think you know about me, these people have nothing to do with it. Let them go, and we can discuss this outside." The man laughed harshly. "These people have everything to do with it. They represent the soft, ungrateful America that operators like you have been protecting. They mock veterans, they don't appreciate sacrifice, and they need to see what real warriors look like when pushed too far." Jake found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "We're sorry. We didn't know. We didn't mean anything by what we said." His apology hung in the air like a desperate prayer, but Sarah could see in the intruder's eyes that they had come for more than apologies. Chief Williams' voice suddenly crackled through Sarah's phone, which she had left on the table during the confrontation. "Sarah, are you still there? We've got reports of suspicious activity at the coffee shop. Are you safe?" The sound made both intruders tense, their hands moving toward their weapons. The man by the door spoke quickly into his radio. "We're compromised. Local law enforcement is responding. Request immediate backup for extraction." He then looked at his partner with obvious concern. "We need to move now." Sarah realized this was her moment. The civilians were terrified and helpless. Law enforcement was minutes away at best, and these two operatives were about to make a decision that could end very badly for everyone involved. Her years of training in hostage situations and urban warfare suddenly became relevant in ways she had never imagined they would be in civilian life. "Before you do something we'll all regret," Sarah said, her voice taking on a different quality that everyone in the room noticed. "You should understand that my service record isn't the only thing you got wrong." She slowly rolled up her sleeves fully, revealing not just the sealed trident tattoo, but additional markings that told a more complete story. The smaller tattoo near her wrist showed a date and coordinates that the larger intruder immediately recognized. "Operation Ghost Harbor," he said, his confidence wavering for the first time. "You were the operator who extracted the ambassador's family from Kabul during the collapse." "Among other things," Sarah replied, her posture shifting in a way that made both men recalculate their position. "I was also the operator who spent 6 months tracking down a cell of domestic terrorists who had infiltrated military communications networks. Terrorists who were selling classified information to groups just like yours." The atmosphere in the room changed again. The civilians still didn't fully understand what was happening, but they could sense that the power dynamic was shifting. Sarah was no longer pretending to be just another customer, and the intruders were beginning to realize they had underestimated their target. Robert, the car dealership owner who had been so vocal about fake military credentials, watched in amazement as Sarah's entire demeanor transformed. This wasn't the quiet woman who ordered black coffee every morning. This was someone who moved with deadly precision and spoke with the confidence of someone who had faced much worse odds than two armed men in a small-town coffee shop. "Your intelligence about my background is impressive," Sarah continued, now clearly in control of the conversation. "But intelligence gathering was never your group's strong point. If it was, you would have known that I didn't retire from active duty. I was reassigned to a classified domestic security task force specifically designed to identify and neutralize threats like the Iron Patriots." The larger man's face went pale. "That's impossible. Our sources confirmed you were discharged and working at a veteran center." "Cover assignments are a wonderful thing," Sarah replied with a slight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "The veteran center is real, and I do help former service members. But I also help identify security threats in rural communities that might be targeted by domestic terror groups. Communities just like Pinewood." Outside, the sound of approaching sirens was becoming audible. Chief Williams' voice came through Sarah's phone again. "Sarah, we have the building surrounded. If you're in there, we're coming in." The man by the door was becoming increasingly agitated. This was supposed to be a simple snatch and grab. Intelligence said she was a washed-up veteran with PTSD living in hiding. He looked at his partner with obvious frustration. "Someone gave us completely wrong information." Sarah took advantage of their confusion to address the civilians who had been caught in the middle of this situation. "Jake, Madison, I need you to move slowly toward the back exit. Take the others with you. Don't run. Just walk calmly." Her voice carried absolute authority, and for the first time since the crisis began, Jake followed instructions without question. The businessmen needed no encouragement to leave, though Marcus paused to look back at Sarah with a mixture of shame and admiration. The woman they had been mocking as a wannabe was now clearly in command of a situation that had left them all helpless. As the civilians moved towards safety, Sarah focused entirely on the two intruders. "Here's what's going to happen," she said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "You're going to drop your weapons and surrender to the police officers outside. In exchange, I won't demonstrate the combat techniques that made me one of the most decorated female operators in SEAL history." The larger man made the mistake of reaching for his concealed weapon. What happened next took less than 3 seconds, but it completely shattered every assumption the remaining civilians had about the quiet woman with the coffee shop routine. Sarah moved with fluid precision that seemed almost supernatural, disarming the first man and neutralizing the second before either could fully draw their weapons. When Chief Williams and her officers burst through the front door 30 seconds later, they found 2 domestic terrorists secured and disarmed, a group of shaken but unharmed civilians, and Sarah Chen calmly adjusting her sleeves to cover the tattoos that had started the entire confrontation. The mockery had stopped. The jokes about fake military credentials were forgotten. Everyone who had witnessed Sarah's transformation would spend the rest of their lives knowing they had completely misunderstood someone whose service to their country went far beyond anything they had imagined possible. But the most shocking revelation was still to come. The aftermath of the coffee shop incident spread through Pinewood like wildfire. Within hours, the story had reached every household in the small mountain community, but the details grew more incredible with each retelling. The quiet woman who ordered black coffee every morning had single-handedly neutralized 2 armed domestic terrorists, and that was just the beginning of what the town was about to learn about Sarah Chen. Chief Williams sat across from Sarah in the police station. A thick federal file spread across the desk between them. "I have to admit, when I called you this morning asking for help with potential threats, I never imagined you were the kind of help we needed." She shook her head in amazement. "The FBI agents who just arrived won't tell me most of what's in your file, but what they will share is extraordinary." Special Agent Jennifer Hayes had flown in from Denver within 3 hours of the incident, bringing with her authorization to declassify certain portions of Sarah's service record for local law enforcement. "What happened today wasn't random," she explained to the assembled group that included Chief Williams, Mayor Thompson, and the still shaken civilians from the coffee shop. "The Iron Patriots have been targeting former Special Operations personnel across the country. But Sarah Chen wasn't just any target." Jake sat in the corner of the conference room, his hands still trembling slightly as he processed everything he had witnessed. The woman he had mocked for her fake tattoo had moved like something out of an action movie, except it was real, and he had been wrong about literally everything. "I don't understand how we were supposed to know," he said quietly. She seemed so normal. That was the point, Agent Hayes replied. Operators like Sarah are trained to blend into civilian populations. The best ones become invisible in plain sight. Ah. She opened a laptop and connected it to the room's projector. What I'm about to show you is a fraction of Sarah's actual service record. Most of her missions remain classified, but I can share enough to help you understand who was sitting in your coffee shop every morning. The first image that appeared on the screen showed a younger Sarah in full combat gear, standing with her SEAL team in front of a helicopter in an undisclosed location. The official citation read, Petty Officer First Class Sarah Chen for extraordinary heroism during combat operations in hostile territory, resulting in the successful extraction of 12 American civilians and 4 Allied personnel from an active combat zone. Madison, who had been working at the coffee shop for 6 months, stared at the image in disbelief. She sat in the same spot every day typing on her laptop. I thought she was probably writing a blog or something. Her voice carried a mixture of shame and awe that everyone in the room understood. Agent Hayes clicked to the next slide. Operation Neptune's Gate, which the terrorists mentioned today, was a classified mission that Sarah led in Afghanistan. Her team infiltrated a heavily fortified compound and retrieved intelligence that prevented a major terrorist attack on American soil. The mission was so sensitive that it doesn't appear in any public records. Marcus, the insurance salesman who had been so confident about fake military credentials, raised his hand hesitantly. How many missions like that did she complete? His earlier mockery had been replaced by genuine curiosity and deep embarrassment about his previous assumptions. Over the course of 8 years, Sarah participated in more than 40 classified operations across multiple theaters of conflict. She received 3 Silver Stars, 2 Bronze Stars, and a Purple Heart, though most of those commendations remain classified. Agent Hayes paused to let that information sink in. She was one of the first women to successfully complete SEAL training and one of the most decorated female operators in military history. Chief Williams leaned forward in her chair. If she was so accomplished, why was she working at a veterans center in small-town Colorado? That seems like a significant step down from her military career. Sarah, who had been quietly observing the briefing, finally spoke. Because the work at the veterans center isn't a step down, it's a continuation of my service in a different form. She looked around the room at the faces of people who had completely misjudged her. Every veteran who struggles with transition, every former service member who can't find work or housing, every soldier dealing with trauma, they deserve the same dedication I gave to classified missions. The teenagers who had been in the coffee shop that morning had been invited to attend the briefing with their parents' permission, since they had witnessed the entire incident. One of them, a high school senior named Alex, raised his hand nervously. Ma'am, when those men came in, you knew immediately that they were dangerous. How did you know when the rest of us didn't see anything wrong? Sarah considered the question carefully. Years of training teach you to read body language, assess threats, and identify weapons even when they're concealed. But more importantly, you learn to trust your instincts when something doesn't feel right. She looked directly at Alex. The bigger lesson is that you never really know who's around you. The person sitting next to you might be a hero, a threat, or something in between. Agent Hayes clicked to another slide showing Sarah receiving a commendation from a high-ranking Navy official. After completing her active duty service, Sarah was recruited for a classified domestic security program. Her work with the Veterans Center provides perfect cover for monitoring potential threats in rural communities that might be targeted by domestic terror groups. Robert, the car dealership owner, looked genuinely ashamed. We made fun of her tattoo. We said it was fake and that she was trying to impress people. He shook his head. I can't believe how wrong we were about everything. The tattoo isn't meant to impress anyone. Sarah replied gently. It's meant to honor the men and women I served with, some of whom didn't come home. Every element of that design represents a mission, a fallen teammate, or a moment that changed me forever. She rolled up her sleeve to show the full tattoo again. The numbers that people assume are decorative are actually coordinates of locations where my teammates gave their lives in service to this country. The room fell completely silent. The mockery that had seemed so harmless that morning now felt like a profound disrespect to fallen heroes and their surviving teammates. Mayor Thompson, who had been quiet throughout most of the briefing, finally spoke. What does this mean for our community? Are we still in danger from these Iron Patriots or other groups? Agent Hayes and Sarah exchanged glances before Sarah answered. The 2 men we captured today were part of a larger operation. Their group has been systematically targeting former Special Operations personnel, trying to recruit some and eliminate others. My presence here was supposed to be secret, but somehow they obtained classified information about my background and location. Which means, Agent Hayes continued, that we have a serious security breach somewhere in the federal system. Until we identify the source, other operators around the country remain at risk, and communities like Pinewood could face additional threats. Chief Williams stood up from her chair. What do you need from us? How can our community support you and protect ourselves? Sarah smiled for the first time since the morning's crisis began. You can start by understanding that veterans come in all forms. The person sitting next to you at a restaurant, working at the grocery store, or ordering coffee every morning might have experiences and capabilities you never imagined. Respect doesn't require understanding every detail of someone's service, just recognition that their sacrifices were real. Jake raised his hand tentatively. Sarah, I owe you an apology. We all do. I made assumptions and said things that were completely out of line. He looked around the room at the other civilians. If there's anything we can do to make up for how we treated you, you can help me continue my work with veterans, Sarah replied. The center always needs volunteers, donations, and community support. Every veteran deserves to come home to a community that values their service, whether they were a cook, a mechanic, or part of special operations. Agent Hayes began packing up her materials. There will be ongoing federal investigation into how the Iron Patriots obtained Sarah's classified information. For now, her cover as a Veterans Center coordinator will be maintained, but with additional security measures. She looked around the room seriously. Everything you've heard today is classified. Talking about Sarah's true background outside this room could put her life and other operations at risk. As the briefing ended and people began to leave, Jake approached Sarah hesitantly. Will you still come to the coffee shop? I mean, after everything that happened and how we treated you? Sarah considered the question. Jake, that coffee shop is part of my community now. What happened today doesn't change the fact that I chose to make Pinewood my home. She paused, then added with a slight smile. Besides, you make decent coffee, even if your customer service needs work. The relief on Jake's face was obvious. Madison joined them, looking equally embarrassed about her previous behavior. I want to volunteer at the Veterans Center, she said earnestly. I don't know anything about military service, but I want to learn and help however I can. Over the following weeks, Miller's Coffee House became an informal headquarters for community support of local veterans. The businessmen who had mocked Sarah's credentials became some of the largest donors to the Veterans Center. Jake and Madison organized fundraising events, and the teenagers who had witnessed the incident started a school program to support military families. The white van that had contained the domestic terrorist was traced back to a larger network that the FBI was already investigating. Sarah's quick thinking and decisive action had not only protected the civilians in the coffee shop, but had also provided crucial intelligence that helped authorities prevent planned attacks on other communities. 6 months later, Sarah still ordered the same black coffee every Tuesday morning at Miller's Coffee House. But now, instead of mockery and dismissive comments, she was greeted with respectful nods and genuine appreciation. The tattoo on her forearm was no longer seen as fake or pretentious, but as a symbol of sacrifice and service that few people could truly comprehend. The quiet woman who had seemed so ordinary had revealed herself to be extraordinary, and in doing so, had taught an entire community that heroism often wears the most humble disguises. The legend of Sarah Chan wasn't built on the classified missions she had completed or the decorations she had earned, but on the simple truth that the most dangerous and capable people are often those who work hardest to appear perfectly normal. And sometimes, the person sitting next to you at a coffee shop, enduring mockery about their fake tattoo, is actually someone who has risked everything to protect the freedom that allows such mockery to exist in the first place.